reflection of society and culture. And I'm sure all of us present here are fond of reading books, and whether it's in English or Hindi or whatever language, we also must have observed that literature does actually reflect society and culture. I'm sure there's no one here who disagrees with this. Or is there anyone here who disagrees with this? No. Okay. So you agree with this point. So we see that literature is a mirror through which we examine the values, beliefs, attitudes, and worldviews that prevailed during the time a particular piece of writing was written. Whether it's a poem or whether it's a writing or an essay, biography, autobiography, it always reflects the time when it was written, or if the author is writing about a particular period, then it will reflect the society of that particular period. For instance, the person may be writing something today but writing about a period that was 100 or 200 years ago. So the writing will reflect about what happened, what the society was like at that time. Now, when you look at the characters, you see that literature often, the characters that are portrayed, they also reflect what we expect of a certain person of that time. So if you're talking about a parent, or we're talking about a teacher, or a business person, or a politician, we will also, the author, they fashion that person according to the time period which they're writing about. So the portrayal of the character also changes according to the time when the story was placed. You can see that through literature we gain insight into how people have dealt with issues such as love, conflict, dreams, aspirations, fears, and social injustice in the different times and places. And through literature, we can also talk about distribution of power and privilege in society, and how marginalized people have found a voice and who have gained recognition. I just want to point out a few books and how they have reflected on society. Like we talk about Jane Eyre, which was written by Charlotte Bronte in 1847. So this is the story of this was based in England of 1847. This is a story of a woman in conflict with her natural desires and social conditions. And you see a lot of patriarchy in these stories, the novel set in that era. So it portrays patriarchy in the Victorian era where women were considered inferior to men. But Jane Eyre, even though she faced so many challenges, she did become a winner in the end. And that time the women were just relegated to looking after the family and the home, and particularly they had to lay emphasis on their husbands. So we see like in this story, we see that Jane Eyre talks, Charlotte Bronte talks about Jane Eyre, who was raised in a clergy school where the principal out there was very harsh with her, and this humiliated the children. And this also kind of reflected what Charlotte Bronte had faced in her life also. So the authors have been through the ages, picking on things which they have seen and experienced. So we come across a lot of this in the novels written. If you look at Pride and Prejudice, this highlights the British class structure and the roles, the gender roles, and the importance of marriage, for girls. Because in those days, women had to go out to work; they didn't have careers. So marriage was a very important aspect of their lives, and to marry well and into the correct status that you wanted, that was a big issue. So you can see these concerns also being reflected in the stories written during that time. And I'll just touch upon a few other stories. And there are a lot of stories written about diasporic literature, about movements and displacement, there's a lot of stories written on partition. Because whatever people have experienced, they have written about it, or other people have, maybe interviewed them or studied about that period and written, and they have put forth what happened during that time through the stories. So some of those stories that we have, which reflect about what happened in partition, during the time of partition, like Train to Pakistan by Kushwant Singh, Tamas by Bisham Sahni, Ice Candy Man by Bapsi Silva, and Sunlight on a Broken Column by Atia Hussain. These are some of the stories that reflect what happened during the partition. Now, closer to date, we see that when the pandemic hit us, there were a lot of stories based on the pandemic also. A lot of stories, a lot of poems, a lot of writing came out during this period. So this is also a record that people in this later generation will be able to know what exactly happened during this period. Also, if you read Premchand, we know that Premchand has, through his stories and through his characters, portrayed a realistic situation of India in those days through his character and the struggles that they faced, and all about life during that time. And I would like to ask Sameena to comment on something of on Premchand's writing.
This conversation regarding the relationship between society and literature cannot be complete if we don't talk about Premchand. Because हम लोग सबने प्रेमचंद पढ़ा है और जितना प्रेमचंद की कहानियों में रियलिटी रिफ्लेक्ट हुई है उतनी शायद किसी भी और राइटर की कहानियों में रिफ्लेक्ट नहीं हुई है. तो आई वाज जस्ट वांटेड टू टॉक अबाउट दिस बुक मोदान, जिसमें कि ही टॉक्स अबाउट अ पुअर मैन एंड अ रिच पर्सन. तो जो होरी है जो एक बहुत गरीब किसान है और दूसरी तरफ एक जमींदार है जिसको एक अच्छा इंसान भी बताया है और वो शायद लोगों के बारे में सोचता भी है. वो उस तरह का जमींदार नहीं है जो कि बहुत एक्सप्लॉइट कर रहा है, मगर तभी वो बात इसी तरह की करता है कि अगर मैं टैक्स देना है तो किसानों को मिलकर टैक्स देना है. और उसके साथ जो और लोग हैं वो लोग बहुत सोच रहे हैं लोगों के बारे में, गरीबी के बारे में, किसानों के बारे में, टैक्स के बारे में, मगर कुछ कर नहीं पा रहे हैं. अल्टीमेटली कहानी जब वो आगे बढ़ती है तो उसमें ये होता है कि अमीर आदमी बहुत अमीर बनने की सोच रहा है और गरीब आदमी वो गरीब होता चला जा रहा है. Which is a very true reflection of at times, ये ड्राइंग रूम कॉन्वर्सेशंस होते हैं जहाँ लोग बहुत इस तरह की बातें करते हैं मगर असलियत कभी सामने निकल के भी नहीं आती और बहुत कम लोग होते हैं जो कर पाते हैं. I think Premchand was, that is the reality is reflect, and always Premchand की कहानी में तो इतना पैथोस भी है कि मतलब गरीब में भी इतना वो गरीबी और बीमारी और मतलब कॉन्फ्लिक्ट और एक्सप्लॉइटेशन इतना ज़्यादा दिखाया है. रियलिटी थी वो, मगर इट्स अ ट्रू रिफ्लेक्शन ऑफ व्हाट द सोसाइटी वाज एट दैट टाइम. एंड देन निर्मला की बात में इसलिए ज़्यादा करना चाह रही हूँ क्योंकि निर्मला में रिलेशनशिप्स दिखाई है, ह्यूमन नेचर दिखाई है. कैसे एक निर्मला एक यंग औरत उसकी रिलेशनशिप अपने मियाँ जो कि ज़्यादा उम्र का है उसके बेटे से हो जाती है, जो कि आपस में माँ और बेटी की है, मगर मियाँ जो कि इतना इनसिक्योर है वो शक करने लगता है कि वो मेरी इन दोनों की जो रिलेशनशिप है ये माँ और बेटे की नहीं हो सकती. और मतलब he falls victim to that और पूरी कहानी उस डिस्ट्रक्शन पे होती है. वो मतलब पूरी फैमिली खत्म हो जाती है और निर्मला भी एंड में she dies a very unhappy person, a very different person. वो शुरू में दिखाया है that she is a sensitive, very loving, very compassionate woman, but then she also dies a very bitter woman. तो इसीलिए मुझे लगता है कि मतलब जो हिंदी लिटरेचर और प्रेमचंद ने तो हिंदी में लिखा, उर्दू में भी लिखा, उनकी कहानियों में सोसाइटी और कल्चर बहुत अच्छी तरह और बहुत ट्रूली, बहुत रियलिटी बहुत अच्छी तरह रिफ्लेक्ट होती है.
Here I would like to mention about Premchand's Thakur Ka Kuan, where the Thakur doesn't allow people from the lower caste to drink water from the well. And if you think about now, that is difficult to imagine that yes, something like that could have happened. That you are refusing to give water to somebody just because he is of a lower caste. तो उस जमाने में ऐसी चीजें होती थी. And Premchand ने अपनी कहानियों के थ्रू ये सब आपको दिखाया है what actually happened in society. Okay, so now moving forward, I would like we have with us Zahra Naqvi here, and I would like her to comment on the portrait of motherhood in literature. So, Zahra, how is a mother traditionally depicted? What is the role she is expected to play? The societal pressure on her. How does she perceive herself in that role and take on the challenges she faces? And the changes in depiction of mother or motherhood over the years in literature written in different parts of the world. So, if you could please enlighten us on that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. The topic that comes to mind is sacrifice. And that is how mothers have been traditionally depicted in literature. One of the examples that comes to mind is Mahashweta Devi's Aaj Rang Hai. It's a very famous novel. And this is about a woman who comes from an upper class, elite family, influential family, and her son goes and joins the Naxalite movement, and then he's killed, very brutally murdered. So the pain of this mother, she's the only one who cares about her son. She's the only one who cares about the fact that he has, been brutally murdered and their body is not being given to them. She's helpless. There is a certain sort of helplessness. And the father, who is a very influential person, and his brother, they're only concerned with the fact that this should not go into the media, that he had joined the Naxalite movement. So they're only concerned about their image. And this mother is the only person who's concerned about the child. So what is depicted in that story is a lot of helplessness and sacrifice and concern. And again another story by Mahashweta Devi, it's called Standayini. It's a very interesting story, Breast Giver. It's about a woman who is, she comes from a Brahmin family, but a very poor family. And then she is taken into this landlord's family as the wet nurse of the daughter-in-law's children. And then she's treated well, and she's fed, and she gets a lot of money, and she's able to support her family and everything. And she feeds numerous children, it's 20, 30, 40 children across the large joint family. But in the end, when she develops breast cancer, and when she's taken to the hospital, the doctor is shocked, and she says, "How many children have you fed?" And she says, 50. And the doctor is shocked and says, "How is that possible?" But the irony of the story is that in the end, when she becomes useless after having been a mother, not just to her own children, but to all of these children, when she is left with breast cancer, there is no one. She dies alone. Her husband abandons her, her children abandon her, everybody abandons her, she dies alone, absolutely alone. So the sort of the energy or the kind of depiction of motherhood that comes out is one of sacrifice and helplessness. But if we come to contemporary literature about mothers, we have a completely different view of mothers. We have a completely, the role that mothers play, and the kind of assertion that motherhood, the feelings of motherhood, the expression of feelings of motherhood that women are writing about, it's completely different now. So the book that I've written, it's called The Reluctant Mother. And it talks about reluctance inside a mother. It talks about the fact that motherhood is not the only thing that you want in your life. You want a lot more with it. You also want to have a social life, you want to have a career, you want to have a love life, you want to have all of those things, and raising a child takes a toll on you, and the kind of reluctance that comes with it, the complexity of the feelings. And then we have stories like Rima Ahmed's book called Unparenting, in which she talks about the experience of being a single mother, a divorced woman, and talking to her son about complex things like divorce, and wanting to marry someone else after divorce, seeing other men after divorce, and other things like that. And then we have a book called How to Raise a Feminist Son by Sonora Jha, who lives in the United States. Now, the fact that mothers are concerned about raising feminist sons, this reflects such a huge change in society. Not just about the role of a mother, not just about the feelings of a mother, but the kind of change in the mother-son relationship. It's not just about the woman sacrificing and being helpless, it's about how the woman, even as a mother, is making changes in society. She sort of controls her own destiny, and she sort of plays an active role in how she wants to shape the destiny of the children and of the society. So it's not just that from Hazar Sikimar Sandaini, where the woman is helpless and sacrificing and pain. So the lot of woman from pain has changed to assertion and dignity, and wanting more from life, and wanting more for yourself and for your children, and to see how as a mother you can bring about change in society.
That's a very interesting Zahra, and a lot of food for thought to the changing concept of mother and motherhood in. So now we talk about reality and fantasy in fiction. So reality and fantasy in fiction have often been seen as opposites. Fantasy fiction is many a time seen as childish, with escapism as its sole purpose. However, it is actually the case. How does fantasy fiction reflect problems in our everyday life? Does fantasy fiction also depict attitudes, values, ideals, and beliefs of the society? So, Sameena, I would like you to give your view on this.
बहुत सारी तैयारी की थी मैंने, मगर मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि वक्त की थोड़ी पाबंदी है, so I don't want to go into the detail of it, but I will definitely like to talk about something like Harry Potter. I think that's one name that rings a bell in everyone's mind. And if your children or if you've read Harry Potter, the first thing, in fact, इसको लिखने के लिए मुझे काफी बच्चों से बात करनी पड़ी, only to see how they have, what is it that they take away from the book, besides the magic that was there in it. And my children who are now grown up and who had read this book 10 years back, they told me that Mama, it was one of the first books which talked about relationships. Whether it was a mother, son, or a relationship between the principal and the student, or between friends, and there were like these two boys and one girl who were friends together. So it talked a lot about relationship, and I think that's also a very true reflection of what J.K. Rowling had in mind when she was writing about a world where she wanted gender sensitivity, where she wanted people to be together, where she wanted youngsters to be together, and they wanted to also have intelligent youngsters who could be questioning, who would be curious, who would be wanting to know. So Harry Potter is सबसे पहले वो दरवाजे खोले. And then of course there are many books that we read, Roald Dahl की Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. उसमें again this entire world of chocolate and of Charlie going in. And of course, when it comes to literature and society, I was just telling ma'am कि Charlie का नाम Charlie Bucket है. तो Charlie Bucket नाम उसका है क्यों शायद वो bucket से वो शायद वो menial था, probably son of a cleaner. So उसका नाम Charlie Bucket रख दिया गया. And then कहानी develops as Charlie Bucket was being like a very ordinary child, a very common man's son, who then becomes who's probably one of the most genuine kid in amongst the 5 kids who have been chosen, and through the entire journey evolves as a superior one amongst all the 5 children who have been chosen to go inside the factory. So that is again a reflection of the society that a common man's child can also be an achiever rather than being just a son or person who had everything. So so these kind of books that have been written have in every way wanted to show some issue that has been prevalent. There are 2-3 other books that I had written about, which have talked about, like there is this book which is by Cassandra Clare, The Vane Chronicles. I had not heard about this one, but I read it when Farah told me that we have to speak about it, which talks about a very flamboyant character who is a bisexual. So again, a reflection of, and this book is written in a few, like probably in 2014 की किताब है, but it is set in 1800. Then there was this character who was a bisexual. So that means, at that time also it existed, and people wanted to, and that is why she writes in this book that there is one character. And many writers who have talked about LGBT also. So probably this was prevalent, and not many people wrote then, but then it existed then, but people are being able to write about it now when they are writing about the society of that time. So I think that is enough to, and then obviously Amish Tripathi, everyone's read, Nelua. Where he creates this country, this city, Nelua, and how he has been shown as a common man who is in pursuit of truth, and how as a common man he becomes the god. So that itself, talks about how a common man can attain a certain stature after being, going through the entire drill of, facing challenges and also resolving issues and this entire journey. So amongst the contemporary writers and amongst the Indian writers and the foreign writers, most of these books have been a reflection of what has happened in the society. I think that is.
Thank you, Sameena. That was really enlightening, very interesting. After talking about the bisexual character in your book, I just remember that I had read a short story in my grandson's English reader, and in that there were 3 or 4 people in the family, and they were trying to pull some stone out of the way. I don't know what it was, but like they were, like holding each other from behind and together trying to pull that stone away. I mean, they tied it to the rope and they were trying to pull it. Then they were not able to do that. So then this person, okay, I'll help you. And he was a little boy who had some disability and he was in a wheelchair. But he also joined them and he also held that rope and he also pulled. And then the stone came away from wherever it was blocking some place. So this shows that, you know, how different kinds of people are also being included in the story. This inclusivity that we have, that, you know, even like people who are not as fortunate to be, you know, endowed with all the physical features, even they're also being included in stories. So stories are not just about healthy and happy people, it's all about all kinds of children and all kinds of people. So now moving on, you know, a lot of books that have been banned, a lot of writers that over centuries have been.
Chuktai, and when she wrote Lehaf, she had a court case against her on charges of obscenity, which she won, by the way, because she asked them to show which line or which word was obscene, and apparently there was no obscene word in it. So it's also very interesting as to what we perceive as obscene, because Saadat Hasan Manto was, he very famously said, अगर आपको लगता है कि मेरी कहानियाँ अश्लील हैं, तो वो इसलिए कि आपका समाज अश्लील है. I only depict your society. Ismat Chuktai's Lehaf, very interestingly, and this is the point I was thinking of when I read the story, is not actually a story about same-sex love. It has depicted that, but it is not about that. It is a story about child abuse. The story is being narrated by a girl of 8 or 9 years old, and Begum Jan is not a heroine in the story. Begum Jan has almost molested this little child. So it is talking about so many things which are considered taboo, same-sex relations, and then the fact that a woman is a child molester. Usually people think that men are molesters, but this girl is being molested by a woman. And the child abuse aspect of this story has been completely brushed under the carpet. So that is also a reflection of society as to which issues are highlighted and which are completely brushed under the carpet. So thank you.
Yeah. So Sameena, would you like to add?